tuning in to the online broadcast network, AFTERBUZZ TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads from over 200 countries and your #1 source in after-show entertainment. AFTERBUZZ TV, the destination for TV superfans. Producing after shows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows. Interviewing celebrities and showrunners. And bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Hey guys, welcome into the Manhattan After Show right here on AfterBuzzTV.com. Season 1, Episode 6, called Acceptable Limits. Thankfully, Marissa and I are both here for a show. It's been a couple weeks. I was solo 2 weeks ago. You were solo last week. I know your solo experience was just as wonderful as mine.
Yes, it was.
And by wonderful, I mean probably a little tedious.
It was riveting,
but
I'll say.
Thank God we're back. Marisa Serafini, I'm Bobby DeMuro. Hello, everybody. Let's jump into it today.
Absolutely.
No time to waste, right? Because there's two of us, so we actually have something to talk about. And let's start today. We've got a lot to do. We've got a couple live reads to do in the middle of that, but let's start off with Fritz.
Poor Fritz.
Poor Fritz.
Hashtag poor Fritz.
Hashtag poor Fritz. If you're on Twitter, that's a hashtag of the after show. This guy, clearly in love with Jeannie.
I mean, in love, definitely puppy love. I'm not sure because, you know, we know Fritz is probably still a virgin.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So he has not had a lot of life experience with relationships and stuff. So he doesn't really, this is a newfound feeling for him, and he doesn't know what to do with himself.
And
it's cute.
And he's taken, and she's a cute girl, and she's a nice girl. And sure, she has this whole prostitute side, but whatever, we'll overlook that.
We can look at that.
Yeah, as long as there's no, they joked about syphilis in this episode, as long as there's no syphilis with Jeannie, let Fritz do his thing.
Good.
We want him to be healthy. And then $2.50 in that time period, $2, $2.25, whatever, that's a little steep, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, but it's funny how they're still putting a price cap on his love, so-called love.
And that's I think the most heartbreaking thing to me. And there's so much to talk with him about, and we'll get to plutonium in a second. But let's start with Jeannie, because it's so heartbreaking that he's so clearly in love with her, and she likes him. She may not love him. Maybe she's manipulating him like a client.
She might be infatuated.
Exactly,
but that's it.
But I think there's some kind of connection there more than just a regular client. Because what kind of a prostitute? I know she's also has a job, but what kind of sideline prostitute is going to entertain a client with no sex and just hang out and
actually take the nice tedious time to cut PB&J corners for him exactly the way Fritz likes
you start making people sandwiches and it's real.
I mean, that's true love.
Yeah, that is true.
Especially
100%. Totally true love, especially when rations are small
so
on Los
small.
Alamos. So she likes him on some level. He definitely is infatuated with her, as we can see with him dealing with Frank early on in the episode. They're experimenting, they're in the lab, and Fritz is like, you know, when you fell in love with Liza, was it immediate, like Einstein's theory of relativity? And Frank's like, no, that took a couple years, pal. Let's get back to the work.
But the fact that Fritz is even asking is like, how did you deal with being in love and like that first feeling that you kind of know something's happening?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's cute for him. I'm really happy for the guy.
The innocence is great.
I don't think it's gonna work out.
No.
But for right
it's
now...
doomed.
No, and it's doomed. And the most heartbreaking scene is when she gives him the sandwich, when she was waiting for him all night and he couldn't come and he was working and whatever. He runs out, sees her, she gives him the sandwich. He's so excited to see her. And she's like, so that'll be $2.50.
Yeah.
And my heart was just like, oh, poor guy. Like, I understand, I'm not knocking her. That's her quote-unquote job or side hustle. But poor guy.
Yeah, but it's because we see that, you know, Fritz is really all into it and he's like literally losing his mind over her. And then the fact that she doesn't really reciprocate the exact same feelings to that extent that Fritz is, I mean, it's a little sad. And
Helen is swimming in it. We'll talk about Helen in a second. She's swimming in men and infatuation and whatever. And she's very casual about it. We're not dating, whatever, blah, blah. And meanwhile, Fritz like finally has one girl and he's like, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, I thought last episode when we first saw Fritz talk about virginity and stuff, I thought he was going to go after Helen when they went to her room and all that sort of stuff, and I thought that was going to be the obvious play, and she was going to give him a pity thing.
That was good editing, though.
It was good, and she kind of turned left on him, which at the time I was sad about, but now that we've seen what's going on, I'm a little happier for him. I think Jeannie's the right move.
I think Jeannie's a better, safer, smarter, especially for Fritz, who is a virgin, who is very vulnerable, and knowing who Helen is as a person, how she sleeps around with men, that like she would not be the best first person to sleep with for Fritz.
I wonder, what is Fritz's holdup in not sleeping with Jeannie. He's paying for it. He's infatuated with her. She's at some level interested in him. The look she gave him when he asked about taking her out or whatever, that wasn't just an annoyed look, hey, as long as you pay me. She was infatuated with him on some level and thought he was at least, like, cute, if she wasn't actually liking him. Why the holdup for Fritz? I know he's nervous. I know it's been a while, but wouldn't you want to, like, no pun intended, get it in?
I wouldn't say get it in right away. I mean, a lot of people take it slow. That's fine. But
with a prostitute you're paying?
Prostitute, yes. But maybe she actually, you know, does. We see that she kind of likes Fritz. Maybe she wants to take it slow, too, in a way. So I think it's just like, you know, let's see how it goes. We build up a relationship and start to know each other before getting it in.
And maybe this is just me being pessimistic. That's the worst phrase I could have used, by the way. Maybe this is just being me being pessimistic and jaded about love. But perhaps Jeannie, as wholesome as she looks to us for being a prostitute, as wholesome as she seems to us in a lot of ways, maybe she's playing Fritz and knows that if she has sex with him, that'll be what he wants. He'll be like, okay, I'm there. That's what I wanted. I'm good now, and he'll go. But if she can keep him paying her to just hang out with him, she'll work this hustle as long as it takes, and then have sex with him months down the road if that's what it takes, and they'll make her $250 every time.
And I think it's also Fritz's way that maybe he just wants to build a relationship. Maybe he is old-fashioned. He doesn't want to just, you know, sleep with someone, but actually get to know them beforehand.
I know you don't watch Masters of Sex on Showtime. I do that after show. Great show. Very, very similar storyline in that show with a character very overweight, very likable, but not very smooth with the ladies, who finally finds a woman who is a prostitute, falls in love with her, is infatuated with her, and it's an interesting dynamic of this relationship where the girl is far more worldly sexually than the guy. Masters of Sex takes place in the late 50s, early 60s. This is obviously World War II. But in those time periods, stereotypically speaking, I know reality was different, but stereotypically, the guy was going to be more worldly than the girl. The girl should be pure. The girl should be chaste, you know, whatever. That's not the case with this relationship. And Jeannie's probably a little more worldly, sexually speaking. Fritz obviously knows nothing. Yep. So the dynamic is cool. The dynamic is different. I like it a lot. I like the relationship a lot. I don't know what's going to happen.
I don't know what's going to happen, but I wonder if they will actually take it to the next level where they actually do sleep together.
Or even
they can't
kiss.
do this just, yeah.
Let them
they
kiss.
can't just do this humongous buildup and us for not to see anything.
Well, if Fritz keeps swallowing plutonium, they can. He's going to die.
That's true.
And that's the transition point, I guess, with the other storyline with Fritz. He functioned very highly into this episode, is the plutonium. And Jeannie is the transition point because Jeannie makes him so tired, makes him so unfocused that he makes mistakes in the lab. And I don't know what specific mistake he made when he was doing that. I don't think we saw anything too specific, but just the idea was he didn't look at something, he overlooked something, whatever it was, some plutonium gets out, and he ends up swallowing it.
Yeah, I think he was going through the motions, and at the first, when he was dealing with the solution, he wasn't wearing gloves. I'm like, if you're dealing with
I know, no gloves, no goggles, no nothing.
Use some scientific protection for that. But then, you know, they had the gloves when he was opening up the whatever it was. But it shows that he was tired. He wasn't really thinking of all the steps that he was going and all the precautions that he could have taken. And then after literally just taking it out of whatever that heater was, the Bunsen burner or something like that, that he just opened it up. He didn't allow it to cool or however you use, you know, materials in that way. So I don't think he was just thinking clearly. And the fact that he wasn't even supervised, he was literally by himself in that room, that also bothered me. I'm like, if you're going to use highly expensive and radioactive material, you should definitely have at least 2 people in the room so you can always monitor what's going to go on if something like an emergency like this happens.
And not only that, but it kind of sucks that Fritz is the guy who is fatigued and makes the mistake. And I know why we obviously had him do it for separate reasons with Jeannie and with the work itself. But Frank Winter's been working himself to the bone. He never sleeps. We know Frank has issues with seeing things to begin with, and we know Frank has had fatigue issues before. So in some reasons, in some levels, Frank should have been the guy to mess up. Frank's the most tired. Frank's the most stressed. Frank is the one burning the most midnight oil. He's the one who should have messed up. It was Fritz, which is tough because if Frank had messed up, it would have changed the dynamic of the relationship with Akeley and Oppenheimer and the team.
Yeah, the whole group in general. They put their project in jeopardy again.
Yeah, exactly. But this time, when Fritz messes up, Fritz, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but he could potentially be a very easy scapegoat, just like Sid Lau was kind of a scapegoat in some ways. Easy there with your microphone. Just like Sid Lau was a scapegoat in some ways, Fritz can be a scapegoat, whereas if Frank had messed up, there would have been a different situation to deal with. But it's Fritz. We wrote it specifically as Fritz, so it's going to be, I don't want to say more casual, but potentially down the road, it'd be much easier to get rid of him.
Yeah, and exactly for those points, and I wondered why they chose Fritz over any other, persons in that group. So maybe it was the comedic element that they brought, because we see him interacting with the guys. Every once in a while they get a laugh out of it. It's like, hey, he ingested plutonium. So I don't know if it was for the comedic element for the show, just for storytelling in general.
And I mean, obviously the character development, I think, not that we've grown tired of Frank yet, but if everything's about Frank, we are going to get tired of Frank.
Yeah.
So we've seen the British guy when they went out, hiking. When the car broke down, they had to hike back. We've seen Meeks when Meeks dealt with, his name just slipped my mind, but the military policeman who killed Sid Lau. We've seen Dunleavy, thank you. And we're starting to see Helen, the other team member, and I assume we're going to see a lot more of Helen next week and beyond. So we need to develop Fritz's character too, so this is a good point to put him in. It just sucks to me, like, Fritz is such a likable guy. There's a lot of thorns to Frank. If Frank had been fatigued and made a mistake, we'd be sitting here and be like, I told you, of course he made the mistake. But when Fritz does it, it's like, oh, I feel bad for the guy. He's in love.
And I think it's also because Frank is so experienced in life and he knows all those things. It would wouldn't make sense if Frank did make those mistakes. Like, better. But Fritz is very, very green compared to everyone else. He doesn't have a lot of life experience, so it would make sense that he would be the one to make a mistake.
Yeah. We'll see with Fritz. I don't know. We got more to talk about him. We're going to transition. Before we transition, though, guys, we've been talking about Walmart a lot recently on Manhattan. We're fortunate that Walmart's sponsoring here on AfterBuzz, and specifically on Manhattan. They've got a new program called Savings Catcher. Very simple, easy way to save. So instead of driving all over town and going to like XYZ box store, go to Walmart, go home after you buy all your stuff or whatever, enter your Walmart receipt, and if any eligible item you purchased was advertised for a lower price at a top store in your area besides Walmart, so if you could have saved money elsewhere, Walmart's Savings Catcher is going to give you an e-gift card for the difference. So if you could have saved $30 overall in your receipt, you're going to get an e-gift card for $30 to shop at Walmart. You enter the receipt online, or you can use the Walmart app on your iPhone or any other phone you might have. Savings Catcher does all the work, and it is guaranteed. It does the work for you. So you get everyday low prices from Walmart, you get the best deals from everywhere else in your area, and you can start with Savings Catcher today.
That's great. Shopping made easy.
Shopping made easy.
It being the Labor Day weekend, it's a perfect time to shop.
I know, the end of Labor Day weekend, which we celebrated by being in here. Walmart.com/savingscatcher. Enter your receipt there. And again, I mean, we say it every week, but thank you to Walmart for sponsoring us on AfterBuzz, for sponsoring Manhattan specifically. I know they reached out specifically to this show, which feels good for us. That's awesome.
Yes.
So thank you very much for them for doing that. Walmart.com/savingscatcher. So there you go.
Great.
All right, let's catch a little bit of Charlie now. As I call him, his new nickname, Chizix. Chizix. Charlie Isaacs.
I'll still call him Charlie.
That's fine. I'll call him Charlie too. That's like my off-air nickname for him is Chizix. Which, by the way, before we get to Charlie, my one note I do have on my note sheet here, in all capital letters, plutonium in Fritz. That's pretty simple.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that makes
What
sense.
happened in the show today? Well, plutonium in Fritz. So let's go to Charlie. Charlie now, we see him getting poked and prodded early on in the show. We know that they have a bunch of physical exams and stuff, and he says, what's going on? You never examined me this much. And we learn that he is going to go to Tennessee. And there is, in real life, in World War II, obviously Los Alamos was a base where they were doing this. There's also a base in Clinton, Tennessee, where they were doing the same kind of thing. They were working on atomic bombs and fission and nuclear reactors and stuff like that.
Well, in Tennessee, there were like 3 different site locations for plutonium plantations, the actual buildings that helped generate plutonium. So that was where Tennessee was really located.
And that's where Charlie's going.
Clinton, Oak Ridge, and Knoxville didn't really approve it, so that's why I went to Oak Ridge.
Which is all East Tennessee. If you've never been in that country, it's kind of hill country, East Tennessee, Appalachian Mountains, very rural. I mean, I feel like a lot of people have heard of like the Oak Ridge Boys, the music group, but very rural, very hilly, the Great Smoky Mountain kind of area, beautiful area. But that's what we're talking about here, and that's where Charlie and Helen go. They fake it as being a married couple. What I found interesting was they fake it as being a married couple to the airline, totally understand, but they also fake it as being a married couple in Tennessee. You think they would have cut the crap there and said, we're from Los Alamos, we can't maybe tell you all that we're doing, but here's why we're here, we're scientists. And because I feel like the Tennessee people kind of saw through them anyways.
Yeah, and you know what, I got also questioned it too. I don't get why they still kept the family dynamic when they probably would have been taken more seriously knowing that they were two well-established scientists instead of a married couple.
Yeah. Or maybe even give them fake names, but lay out that they're scientists.
the validation that they are just scientists and they don't have a romantic relationship going on, that had nothing to do with what their operation was going on.
Exactly. And the issue for me, too, with this is it was so contentious between them and the Tennessee folks. That leader in Tennessee is a jerk, man. He's going to be a jerk next week, too.
Very pompous.
But it's so contentious with the Tennessee folks and with Charlie and Helen. And hierarchy is such an issue. Charlie and Helen is like, this order comes from the guy who hired the guy who hired the guy who hired your boss.
It's a whole bureaucratic system. I mean, it's not just at this place. I mean, we'll see it with Frank's story, but like the whole bureaucratic system of how the government runs.
Yeah.
Even to this day. But like even back in that time when they're trying to do something, as Sarah says, Manhattan Project, and get all these nuclear bombs off the ground, you know, it's just like all these steps and loopholes that they have to go through. It's ridiculous.
Well, I mean, and I understand, but at the same time, it's like, if it's so bureaucratic, if it's such a pissing contest, my boss is better than your boss, my boss is better than your boss, blah, 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 why not just come clean about who you are? This is where I come from, these are my credentials, this is where I am. I'm not maybe going to tell you exactly what I'm doing. Los Alamos is very secretive, and I'm sure Tennessee is too, but this is who I am, this is what I know, you got to listen to me. Because if Charlie and Helen had been allowed to come in and do that, they might have had a little easier time in Tennessee. Or if Tennessee had been ordered to let them come in and do that, wherever the bureaucracy messed up here, something ain't right.
Yep. No, I completely agree.
But basically, the big story of this is Tennessee is not safe. They're trying to go, the X-10 reactor is trying to go live, like, the next day, and they're not ready. I think Helen said, what was it, 22 different safety standards they didn't meet, or 22 recommendations?
22, yeah.
Yeah, so that doesn't sound ready.
That's just 22, and like and the fact that Helen was the one that caught the blueprints. They were completely misprinted and off by 6 inches, which is a great deal. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't think it, but that's a huge mistake in the whole engineering of the whole place. So, I mean, I love how a woman pointed that out, and then you can see the whole women-men power struggle there, too, and be like, okay, really, a woman's telling us this. Why is this legit?
And the whole thing is minority majority. It's
exactly.
Helen is the minority, a female scientist in this time period, and it's Theodore, the black man in the South in this time period. The other thing going on in Clinton, Tennessee in this time period, about 10 years after this, and they may have been in Oak Ridge, but in Clinton, Tennessee, about 10 years after this, there was a very, very famous desegregation case after Brown versus Board of Education, all those things. Clinton, Tennessee desegregated their public schools, and it was a huge issue, and white power people came to town and agitated town, and they protested schools, and everything that happened at Little Rock Central that we all know in American history in the 50s about desegregation and black students being harassed going to public schools. The same thing happened in Clinton, Tennessee. And the reason I bring it up is Theodore, the black scientist or the black executive, whatever he was, and how he kind of is so subservient to the white person in charge, the white leader. And then you've got, talk about pissing contests, you've got Helen the woman, Theodore the black man. They're probably the two smartest people in the situation.
The two people who actually know what's going on and the extent of all the damage that they could potentially be doing. But because the positions where they're at in life and or in the society is that they don't have the courage to really, well, I mean, we kind of see Helen actually, but Theodore didn't have that courage to speak up against people. And even if he did voice his opinion, no one's going to listen to him.
It wasn't going to get heard. And you could see that when the leader, the bad guy in Tennessee, who I still don't have his name, the bald guy, when the bald guy in Tennessee, after Theodore and Helen are kind of agitating this in one of the meetings, he walks up to Charlie and he's like, can I have a word? And that's such a disrespectful thing. It's like, hey, buddy, white man to white man. Forget the black guy, forget the woman. Let's talk white guy to white guy. That's the most overt idea of this majority versus minority. And thankfully, Charlie was like, nah, dude, if my wife said it, that's the way it is. Like, you got to listen to the woman. You know, you should do a little more of this.
And I think that's where that line was the only reason why I accepted that. The fact that they kept going on with their fake relationship is like, hey, this is my wife, you better listen to her. I mean, I don't know if that did help, but I mean, I didn't mind it at that time.
Yeah. And he's not really quite listening to her because after these safety recommendations and the 22 and whatever, and Theodore mentioned they had taken care of one, they like took care of one building, but they still had like 21 to go.
Yep.
And the guy was like, nope, the reactor goes live tomorrow. We're going to worry about all your safety stuff after the reactor goes live. Now, we know in American history that Oak Ridge or Clinton doesn't explode. It doesn't blow up. So something will happen unless they change the story a little bit. But the path that they are on in Tennessee is a dangerous one, and it should probably get off of it.
Yeah, and
to put it mildly.
It's also interesting that they're adding all these provisions that a lot of the audience, general audience, wouldn't think that they had to go through before they can even execute all these procedures that are going on. So it makes sense in that way, and the fact that everything is so rushed and this back in this day, they're like Americans have to be the first one to get the plutonium, to build this bomb, to take on the other countries. So it's just like the whole ticking time bomb that we have going on, and that storyline, it makes sense why they're like, no, we're gonna go tomorrow. We don't have time.
Yeah, they don't have time, and they know they don't have time because the information that Cox gets, that apparently probably other people know about the Germans being 2 months ahead. We'll talk about that and Frank and the war effort and stuff in a little bit. But I guess my last question for you, and this gets into predictions, and we'll predict it later, but my last question for you is about Charlie and Helen, because Charlie has some tough situations going on the home front. Abby's still skeptical that he cheated his way around. He cheated his way, not necessarily in relationships yet, but that he cheated his way.
But she's now questioning Charlie.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And once you start questioning somebody, once you have just that inkling of this person's this way, then everything festers, and you never know. You know what I mean? You don't get the text message from your boyfriend or girlfriend last night. A couple days ago, it wouldn't have mattered. But once the doubt creeps in, now you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, even if it's wrong.
And now the fact that Charlie is literally away from his wife, there is a physical separation or rift between them. I mean, that even adds more to what's going on.
And Abby has been told that Helen is with him. Do you remember what Abby, when she was there and she looked at him and
that
whatever?
That woman from the other team.
She knows. Yeah, Abby knows. And you know women better than I do. Women are threatened about everything about other women all the time, if I've learned anything.
It's still a common thing.
Yeah. So Abby's going to be threatened. Abby's going to be insecure. We see in the coming attractions that Abby may act on that in a way that's maybe not so good for herself. No. But in the meantime,
for the relationship.
In the meantime, Charlie's got some problems ahead of him, and it has nothing to do with work.
No, it doesn't.
Poor guy.
No. But what I mean, okay, here's my question. But do you think Charlie would go through it, despite the fact that right now his relationship is a little rocky? But we know if he goes through with it with Helen, Helen wouldn't think anything of it because that's the kind of person she is. But would Charlie do it?
Here's the thing, and I hate to say this, I think Charlie very well might go through it because Helen is so heartless. And I don't mean heartless necessarily in a bad way. Helen is going to represent, or I think she's going to represent, somebody, a woman in the 50s or woman in the 40s, who has very progressive, very powerful sexual agency, which not a lot of women then did, or at least they didn't broadcast it. The stereotype we know is that they were more kind of diminutive. The reason I say that is Helen was so casual with that corporal in the car, and he was like, am I going to tell him I'm dating a genius? And she's like, we're not dating. Like, we're just screwing, you know? And it's so casual and so regimented and so black and white for her that if she can turn it on and off with that corporal, why couldn't she turn it on and off with Charlie? Sure. I've been with girls like this, not to talk about me, but if you can turn it on and off like that, they don't have a conscience. And I'm not judging them and saying they're a bad person. Helen's not a bad person for doing that, but she doesn't have a conscience in the sense that to her, it doesn't matter if Charlie's married. They're in Tennessee, they're far away.
For Charlie, it doesn't matter.
It matters for Charlie, but for Helen, it's like, this is a physical need. I want this. We'll get back to Los Alamos. Nothing's going to happen. But for Charlie, that's the end of the world, you know, or I think it would be the end of the world. So what does he do? How does he act on that?
Exactly. Yep. It should be interesting how they're going to portray it, if it even happens. They'll get into predictions.
Apparently from the previews, I mean, you saw that she kind of propositions him.
Kind of.
You know?
But does it actually, do they actually get through?
How many times are you telling people to go back to your hotel room? That's the thing. I mean, like, that's pretty direct. That's really direct. If you're at a bar asking somebody to go back to your hotel room, there's not a lot of, like, leeway. Oh, I was talking about going back and like putting a puzzle together. Yeah, sure. Okay, whatever. Reading the Bible that they put. Yeah, reading the Bible that they put in the cabinet. Let's look at Netflix. I don't know.
Netflix nights.
We'll see. Let's transition again to our last topic. Before we do that, guys, if you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes. I know, Marissa, in a minute you are going to be doing YouTube comments. We got a bunch of good YouTube comments from people lately. Yeah. So if you're watching on YouTube, keep watching, keep commenting, do all that good stuff. I know we get tweets from a lot of people. But if you haven't yet, go subscribe on iTunes. If you're listening to the audio, you can rate us there. You can comment, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. I know not a lot of you guys probably like the solo shows, but hopefully we don't have any more of those.
No, I think we're good.
Back.
We got our ish together.
Okay, good. I'm not going to Tennessee or anything. I don't know about you.
No.
But yeah, so all right, so let's talk about our last topic. Kind of a brief one, but it is a very important one, and it's the war effort more generally. The biggest issue, the biggest story from the war effort today is the fact that we learned the Germans are more than 2 months ahead of the Americans. They're not only 2 months ahead like Cox thought, but according to Frank, looking at the equations, they are already testing yields, they're testing bombs and how powerful they are. They're way more than 2 months ahead, and from what all Frank and Cox and them know, the Germans are much closer to a bomb than the Americans are. That's a problem.
That is a serious problem, because I believed I mentioned it in last after show that because the Germans are so ahead, they actually had the physical bomb. It's just a matter if it works or not. Americans had the theory of what could be put in the bomb. They don't have any tangible, I mean, they have the material, but they just haven't assembled it yet. So even that takes time. So, you know, and again, it comes back to the ticking time bomb. Literally.
Literally, no pun intended.
Like, the whole story that's like keeping everything so fast paced, because everything is rushed right now. And I mean, hopefully we'll see a lot of the tests that go on.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm watching a show about bombs. I want to see a bomb test.
Yeah,
It's been 6 weeks. Let's see a test.
That doesn't blow up in Frank's face.
Exactly. It doesn't blow up in Frank's face or get swallowed by Fritz.
Yeah.
But that's the funny thing too, and that's the interesting thing, is the idea of being rushed. The Americans are already rushed. Frank and Fritz and them are already working around the clock. If the Germans are 8, 10, 12 weeks ahead, that's 8, 10, 12 weeks. You got to make up even more around the clock to be even more rushed. And Marissa, when you're rushed, what happens?
You make mistakes.
Totally.
Haste is waste. But if
Haste
you think
is waste.
Haste is waste. But if you think about it, Frank's bomb, we know, because the woman did the crunching on the numbers, it will save them 12 weeks. So if they did it, if they just went with Frank's project,
good call,
they'd be caught up with the Germans already.
Good call. That's a really good call. Assuming
There's
Frank's
the 12
project
weeks.
is the right way.
Yes.
I think in our hearts we know that
We
Frank's
know.
team's doing it right and Eckley's is not. But there could still be weird wrinkles. But you're right, that
But
12
literally,
weeks thing. Yeah.
if they go straight with Frank's idea, they could catch up. And there makes up the 12 weeks.
And the really important relationship here is Frank and Cox finally warming up to each other. And Frank and Cox kind of being like, I don't like you, you don't like me, we have a common problem. Wait a minute, this is a real problem? Okay, you know what? Let's team up. And we have personal issues, and I'm Cox, and I think Sid Lau is a spy, and I'm Frank, and I think you're a douchebag.
But again,
it doesn't matter.
It's the bureaucratic system, and the whole pissing contest. There's like, I'm better than you, and you're better than, you know. And if they got over their high horses, they could get stuff done.
And Frank is seen as such an outsider by everybody. If a guy like Colonel Cox gets on his side, who's the next guy in the military to get on his side? Who's the next guy? Because it ain't that far from Oppenheimer. If Colonel Cox and some of these other people truly get on Frank's side, Oppenheimer at some point does turn around and say, you know what? That crazy Frank's team is right. Let's put more resources to them. Here we go. And that's when they save the 12 weeks.
Yeah. Well, Frank can also make another friend with the medic.
With the doctor?
With the doctor
yeah,
there.
That's true. That's a good point. Because that doctor who Frank was very contentious with is now on his side, because the doctor realizes he knows as little as Frank and them know.
does.
Yeah.
That they're literally pointing each other and they're going around in circles.
Which, by the way, that doctor scene was heartbreaking with Fritz and them drinking and whatever, and blowing plutonium when they're drunk and getting the read on it. But that was a heartbreaking scene to have Fritz say, you know, here, have a beer, and the doc's just kind of like, I can't. And the doctor's face is like, I think you're actually going to die.
Yeah.
Like, this is what happens when you swallow plutonium. Even a small amount.
And even when the doctor was saying that, like, I only had 1 week training in radiology, I'm like, then what are you doing in that position? Who put you there? Which, you know, which we find out the answers. But the fact that he himself even knew he was underqualified for that position, like, just shows that everything that's going on, he still doesn't know, despite how high of a rank he has there.
And how little importance they put on health. And obviously, this is something very general in decades past in industry and business and stuff like that. There was no OSHA. There was no occupational health and safety. There's no, you know, like what we do for soldiers PTSD-wise now falls way short of what they need. But it's so much more than it used to be. And we talked about it with Dunleavy and what he's going through. And this is another example. There's no concern for health. It's wartime. We need results. We need the bomb to get made. These people might suffer from radiation, whatever. We'll put a doctor there. He doesn't know what he's doing. Let's just put it there to make it happen. We got to get the results.
Sacrifice the few.
Yeah.
You know, but
the problem is you're sacrificing the smartest few.
I know, that is very true. But also, even back in that time, you know, like a humongous difference from nowadays, that, like, even if they did have all these conditions, they didn't have the treatment for it.
Yeah.
Like we do today. So
yeah, the treatment of plutonium is drinking beer.
I mean, that's an awesome prescription.
I was gonna say, I'll lie and say I swallowed some plutonium. 24 milligrams, my bad.
You'll feel better in like 24 hours. But the fact that, like, if a condition or any health problems come up, it's basically you could do this or you're going to die. It was like they only had a few options.
Yeah.
Not as many clear-cut options that we have today.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, predictions are going to be fun. Before we do that, though, we don't have news and gossip today. We have social media, I guess we'll call it. I don't know if we have like a sound for social media.
No.
I don't know, whatever.
AfterBuzz
We'll go with
TV
news.
We'll go with news. Sure,
The
that works.
AfterBuzz
Because
news.
in a way, it is news. It's news from you guys at home. So, Marissa, what do you have?
All right. So last week, I asked on our after show that, you know, there was the situation where, remember when Babu was talking about the sexual story, if a man screws a woman more often. I was like, would they use that vernacular in that terminology back in the 1940s? It's like, that seems a little too brash for that time period. And I asked, would they be more, you know, have more tact back then? And then Moody Lupin, thank you, Moody Lupin, for commenting back.
This is on YouTube, right?
This is on YouTube. She says, I think absolutely, sorry, as I'm going through the comments, she had a lot to say. But she says, the Major's attitude towards Liza and all that, and, you know, just the women in general, that he would think that the work in Manhattan was more valuable than anything women could ever do. And just, and also, call the shots 13. Thank you very much. He says, I really love Frank's team. And also, I looked up the 40 slang and screw up as in mistake was used back in that time. But he couldn't find the source that say screwing women was like more used in that time. So just thinking, to answer that, I still don't think that they would use, you know, screwing women as that terminology in the vernacular back then.
Yeah.
But it just, you know, just the historical accuracy in the written speech.
Interesting. I would have never even thought of that.
Yeah.
To even think about it.
I mean, it just kind of, I felt it was just too brash when he was telling the story, and I was like, I don't believe that. But thank you, Moody Lupin and Call the Shots 13 for commenting. We love listening and reading all your opinions, and they think we're doing a great job.
Awesome. We need to get a professor of like etymology or whatever words, a study of words, to tell us about, because you've seen things online. I don't know if you've ever seen, I think it's on Thought Catalog or some website. It's like 100 slang phrases from the 20s. It's fascinating. It's so fascinating. Print it off and you'll start using them. But I know they have 100 slang phrases from the 40s, from World War II. We should look that up. That's a good thing.
We should.
I'm going to write that down. And while I'm writing that down,
Be a bit archaic, you know.
It'd be cool.
But it would be cool. Bring it back.
Everything's back there. I learned last night on the Kardashians after show that vintage wedding dresses are back in. So if vintage is back in fashion, vintage is back in vocabulary. Bring it back.
There you know. And you know, wedding dresses used to be yellow instead of white.
There you go. Just history lessons all over. All right, let's go to predictions.
And now, your AfterBuzz TV predictions.
Writing down 100 phrases from the 1940s. I'm going to see if I can find something like that. Maybe we can find phrases on sex. I'm sure they have them. I know that they have them.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Especially guys in a bar. They definitely had ways to talk about it, as they always will. All right, so let's go to predictions. What do you got for us? And don't give me something obvious like Abby's going to get her butt touched by a guy, because we totally saw that.
Well, we totally know that's going to happen. But the thing is, okay, I predicted that Abby and Charlie's relationship was going to get rocky because no relationship is that perfect, and there it is. We have that. I want to see the Germans do a test, because right now we just see like one quick glimpse of the Germany, but I want to actually go to another so-called Manhattan Project and see what they're working on. So I think we're going to see more of that because they hinted at it a little bit. But other than that, I mean, not really. I think Dunleavy coming, because we haven't seen him in a couple episodes, he's going to come back, and we're going to see Callie get
I would say with Frank stuff.
Trouble. Yeah,
absolutely.
Callie.
Those are good predictions. I think Abby and Charlie are kind of an obvious prediction. I think another prediction for me, and I don't quite know where it fits in, but remember where we dropped these bombs in real life. I want to start seeing the Japanese. And I don't know if we see them in war because they had a very unique way of fighting on a couple different fronts from the air and on ground and on the South Pacific. But I want to start seeing the Japanese. I don't know if we track a story in like a Nagasaki or Hiroshima, or track a family, or if we track Japanese scientists who might have been doing something similar. But I think at some point, I know the Germans and Hitler's the big bad guy.
Oh, I thought.
But I want to see the Japanese a little bit, because that's where the bombs are going to end up.
That is true. And also, to go back to the Germans, I think we're going to see, because we know during the whole Manhattan Project that the Nazis tried to sabotage Manhattan Project a few more. And, you know, there were a lot of operations. In tonight's episode, we saw the mention the name Magpie, you know, who was who, like, I believe helped with the operation, one of the last few operations that the Nazis tried to take over and sabotage Manhattan Project. So I think it'd be cool if we saw the Nazis try to, you know, stop whatever's going on in Los Alamos.
And Dunleavy saves the day again. First against Japanese spies like Sid Lau, then against the Nazis. What about that white dove at the start of the show, too? That white whatever.
Oh, the symbolism. I find it very interesting, because we know that there's going to be a lot of fatalities with these bombs that they're creating, but also the fact that the symbolism, because there is death, there's still life is going to go on.
Yeah.
There is hope for a better life.
We'll see.
We'll see.
I can't wait, man. All right, let's do social media links and stuff like that. Marissa, where can they find you on Twitter or maybe Snapchat?
I don't have Snapchat. I will not have Snapchat ever. You can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Serafini TV.
I'm on Twitter at Bobby DeMuro, Instagram at Mr. Bobby DeMuro, and I will give out my Snapchat since you were such a party pooper. If you have Snapchat, send me a snap, just my name, Bobby DeMuro, on there. I will snap you back. That's it this week on Manhattan. We'll be back next Monday like normal for our next episode. Only 4 episodes to go in the first season.
Yeah.
So it's coming to a head right now. I can't wait to see what happens. Marissa, thank you. Finally, we're back together.
We're back together.
I know. Team Bobby, Marissa. There you go.
Yes.
That's it this week on Manhattan, guys. We'll see you a week from today.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.